Welcome to Sincerely Me, a podcast about self-discovery and inner work so you can cultivate a deeper relationship with yourself and show up more fully in your work and life. My name is Tallia and I'm honored to be your host. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy you are here and tuning in to this awesome episode with the lovely Darrah Brustein. Before I go into my introduction of Darrah and kick off the conversation with her, there are a couple things I wanted to discuss. So the first is, if you listened to last week's episode with Jason Beck on creating sacred routines and rituals, you would know that a lot of what we ended up talking about was how we choose to pay attention in life and what we give our time and attention to. If you haven't yet listened to that, I highly encourage you to do so. Jason and I are good friends from grad school, and it's just a very funny and lighthearted conversation. But what we did talk about at the end was the power of writing a letter to attention and actually talking to attention to see what your relationship is to it, to see how intentionally or not so intentionally you're choosing to spend your time, and to just kind of engage in a letter writing exercise with attention. So we asked you all to send your letters to us to sincerelymepodcast@gmail.com. And you did. And that was super exciting for me to see and read. And I did promise to share one of your letters on the podcast. So I chose one, and this one is from Nikki. And this is her letter to attention. Dear Attention, I'm so sorry I haven't been paying attention to you. How's that for ironic? I'm going through my days so caught up in my thoughts and what I have to do that I haven't really been able to press pause to even see how I'm using you or spending you. Someone once said that love is the quality of our attention, and I'm realizing that I'm either not paying attention to what's at hand or I'm paying attention to the wrong things. And I'm learning that not everything or everyone deserves my attention. Perhaps I'm giving you out too freely. I've also learned that I can take away something's power over me by not giving it my attention. So all of that to say, I'm excited to start working more together to more intentionally choose how you're being spent. Sincerely, me. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much, Nikki, and for all of you other lovely folks who sent your letters to us. I'm hoping to continue this throughout the rest of the podcast in terms of sharing your letters with our audience. So please continue sending them, writing them. It makes me so happy to see and read. The next thing I wanted to chat a little bit about is something that I kind of teased in a previous episode, but I wanted to share something exciting that I've been working on with you all. And so many of you have already joined the waitlist to get notified, which is, again, just like the most exciting thing ever. So for the longest time, really for the past 6 or so years, I've worked with women to help them figure out what's next when it comes to their work. So whether that's getting you into your dream job, helping you start a business, it's always been focused on career and business and kind of professional development. What I've come to realize over the past few months is that far too often we look to our work, to our jobs, to our careers for fulfillment. Not to say that fulfillment can't come from work, because I'm a full believer that it can and it should. But we reach a point in life where, we have the job, we have the business, we're making the money we wanted. We've kind of checked off all those boxes. We've achieved success in the way that it's defined externally. And we look at our lives and we have all the reason to believe that we should be happy, right? I have all the things I've ever wanted. I have all the things I've been working towards, but something is missing. Something's just not filling me up in the way that I thought it would. And what a lot of us feel in that moment is insignificance. And I know I've talked about insignificance briefly on a previous episode, but it's the one problem I'm seeing everywhere, all around me, is that so many of us feel insignificant. We feel like the way we're spending our time, the work we're doing, the way we're living our lives just doesn't matter enough. and we want to do something that matters. We want to live life in a way that feels significant. That's why I ask every guest I have on the podcast, what does it mean to live a life of significance? Because I think deep down, that's what we all want. I think that's what connects all of us together. But again, so many of us sit in this problem of feeling insignificant. And that is the problem that I want to be solving day in, day out in the work I'm doing. And for those of us who might be feeling challenged by these feelings of insignificance, we know that it's not what we're meant for. We know that we're meant for something more. And so we start thinking about how to get ourselves into a different place. And there's a bit of an awareness for a lot of us at that point that what's missing, that like deep, deep, deep fulfillment, is not going to come from anything outside of you. It's not going to come from a partner. It's not going to come from another job. It's not going to come from making more money. It's going to come from within you. It's going to come from taking the time to do the inner work. Again, in the spirit of this podcast, it's going to come from taking the time to get to know yourself, to really figure out what you need, what you desire, what changes need to be made in life. Maybe there are no changes that need to be made in life. Maybe it's just changing the way you perceive certain things, changing the way you think about yourself, changing the way you shape your mindset and changing the stories you're telling yourself. So my coaching has shifted recently towards helping people do that work, do the inner work, not so much the career and business stuff as much anymore, but it's what we call transformational coaching. So it's helping you change the way you perceive yourself, helping you kind of cultivate a more resilient mindset, helping you tell more authentic stories to yourself and to other people, and just get a grip on the narratives that are playing in your mind and find that sense of inner peace and fulfillment. Again, not so much from things outside of you, but from within yourself. So that is what I want to be doing more of and why I want to be doing it. And now I'm going to tell you how it's going to happen. So starting in August, I will be running my first Inner Work Circle. So the Inner Work Circle is a year-long women's group focused on supporting women in exactly this work: the self-development, the deep dive, turning inward, the spiritual growth, the time that you all are looking for if you are ready to get to know yourself and cultivate the most important relationship in your life. So what the Inner Work Circle will look like is this: once a month, 10 to 15 of us come together. So yes, it's a very intimate group of women. And we explore different topics as it relates to what I've already talked about. So a lot under the umbrella of positive psychology. So how to cultivate positive emotion, how to tap into your body and what you're feeling, how to be more mindful in your day-to-day, how to choose what you're paying attention to, how to regain a sense of ownership and control in your life, how to think in a way that produces the results you're looking for in your work and life, how to connect with yourself, how to figure out what you really want, how to manifest abundance. Goodness, the list goes on. And a lot of that will be determined by who's in the group, right? It's for you all. So as a group, we'll talk about the topics that will resonate and hit home most. And in that way, I'm really thinking about this group as something that we create together. So this idea of co-creation and manifesting what is most needed for those who join the group. This is what I'm just like super jazzed about in life, waking up every day. So outside of these virtual monthly sessions, we will be meeting twice in the year for weekend-long immersive getaway retreats. For me, the in-person one-on-one stuff is just as important, and I never want to lose that in my work. And I also think for women who are doing this type of work to come together in community, to build relationships, to feel supported in person is super critical and vital. So year-long program, once a month we meet virtually, and then twice in the year we meet in person for getaway retreats where you can rest, reconnect with yourself, put everything we've talked about monthly into action, and just be together with women who value and prioritize similar things as you. So if you want to learn more about this, if you want to join the waitlist to get notified when applications open. They will be opening in June, so stay tuned for that. So many of you have already added your names and emails, and I cannot wait to connect with you all to hear more about how this program can support you best. But you can head over to talliadeljoux.com/waitlist and get on the list. Thank you for listening to all of that. It's a little scary, but exciting for me to put this out into the world because it's something I've been thinking about and dreaming about for a long time. And speaking of dreams, that is why you're here today, because we have a super awesome conversation with Darrah Brustein on learning how to dream again. Because I'll be the first to say, at some point in life, I forgot how to dream. I didn't make the time to dream. Dreaming felt impractical. Dreaming felt lofty. Dreaming felt, it's like I can't dream until I've reached a certain point in life. So this conversation with Darrah is hopefully the encouragement you need to let yourself dream again and learn how to do it, if not remember how to do it, because we knew when we were little, when we were kids, we knew how to dream. We did it all the time. We were encouraged to. So with all that being said, I would love to introduce Darrah to you all, give you some context into who she is, what she's done, and the great ways that she contributes in the world, and then we'll kick off the conversation. Darrah Brustein, there are so many ways to introduce her, and her and I joke about it all the time. It's like, how do you capture all the things you've done into like one title? And for her, it's honestly pretty difficult because she's done so many incredible things throughout her life. And I'm going to share some of that with you because I think it'll give you a sense of where she's been, but also what she's passionate about. So here are some things that she's created, ways she's added value and contributed to the world around her. So she's written a kids book on financial literacy. She's built a payment processing company that has now spanned into 38 different states. She created more recently a 3-day virtual summit on lifestyle design that reached nearly 10,000 people, which is absolutely incredible. She has also launched a networking events company called Network Under 40, which now serves over 30,000 people. She also writes for Forbes, Entrepreneur, and Thrive Global. She has really created a life that, by many standards, is honestly so admirable and something that many people strive for. She has kind of come to a place in her career now where she's been able to look at all the different things she's done and ask herself, okay, well, what have I been doing throughout my life that can serve people? Because if there's anyone in this world who is of service and just comes from a place of generosity in her every day, it is Darrah. And her kind of motto, if not mission now, is to help other people design intentional lives, build businesses to fund their lives, and create networks to support the lives they want to live. So she's a networking guru. I could go on and on talking about Darrah all day, but hopefully that gives you some context into who she is and the type of work that she does. And again, this conversation that her and I have is about learning how to dream again. So I hope you enjoy. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Darrah. Welcome to the podcast, Darrah.
Thanks, T. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being here on this insanely rainy day.
I know the rain just literally began to monsoon the second we began to record.
So hopefully you're down for a little bit of rain in the background. Light a candle to kind of set up the conversation for all of you who are listening today. As you know from the title of the episode, Darrah and I will be talking about learning to dream again. And I do want to make the distinction. We're not talking about learning how to dream. We're learning about how to remember dreaming, because it's something that we used to do, but in some ways forgot to do or forgot how to do along the way. So it's learning how to dream again. And I'm going to start by reading a passage from one of my favorite books called Journey to the Heart by Melody Beattie. And it's called Your Dreams Are Important. A woman told me about a dream she had, one that was bothering her deeply. What do you think it means? She asked. I'm not sure, I replied. Besides, it doesn't matter what I think. The important thing is what you think. What is it telling you? Now, we dream two kinds of dreams. Waking dreams and sleeping dreams. Both are powerful forms of consciousness. Our sleeping dreams, the images that dance in our minds while we sleep, hold many clues to life, growth, the future, the past, healing, and our connection with others. They may reveal suppressed emotions. They may be bits and pieces of prophecy. They may be symbols of truths we're about to learn. But our waking dreams are even more important. We go about daily with our expectations, wants, desires, hopes. Our hearts plan for the future. We may not express these dreams. We may not even realize that we're superimposing them on our lives, much the same way we can forget what we dream when we sleep. There is power in allowing ourselves to become conscious of our waking dreams. What is this dream telling you about what you want, fear, hope for, or desire? Expressing our dreams connects us to our consciousness and higher consciousness. Expressing them will connect us to the creative force. Tapping into your dreams helps you tap into your creativity for your life, projects, and the creative force of the universe. So don't forget there's power in dreaming, whether you're asleep or awake. So take time to honor and express your dreams.
Beautiful.
I love it. This is the best book. So every day of the year, there's a different meditation. And oddly, like every time you open this book to the day of the year, whatever it says is exactly what you have to hear in some way. So I wanted to start us off with that because it touches on exactly what we're talking about, the importance of dreaming, especially the waking dream. So we're not talking about dreams when you sleep. We're not psychoanalyzing what came up in your dream last night. That's a separate conversation. But we are talking about learning to dream again. So with that, I would love for us, Darrah, to start with talking about why it's hard to dream. Because I think, as I mentioned earlier, dreaming is something we're encouraged to do when we're young. We talk to our friends about what we want to do when we grow up, and we, journal about it in school, and it's encouraged, it's welcomed, it's invited. But somewhere along the way, we become adults and have to think logically, or so we're told, or so we believe. And dreaming no longer becomes a part of what we set aside time to do.
Yeah, I think that responsibility is a huge player in this, that people think of responsibility almost as an antidote to dreaming. Mm-hmm. And I completely disagree. However, I understand because I was conditioned in the same way, that you're raised doing exactly the things that you referenced, Tallia, that, it's what do you want to be? What do you want to do? And actually, I think that there's a lot of harm in that question, and asking people when you're so young and you're formative and you're a sponge, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because one, it's making you feel like you are defined by what you do. Yep. And two, because I think as you creep older and older, as we all do naturally, you start to feel like I should be there. Mm-hmm. And then starts to feel this restricted, scarce feeling. And that's, I think, where we start to freak out, when you have responsibility meets scarcity meets I'm behind, or I haven't gotten there yet. And then you feel like you've got to grasp onto something. And I only say any of this, and I'm saying it projected at you, but really I should be saying it as because I did all of these things myself. When I was a kid, the thing I said I dreamt to be wasn't even a thing. It was a person. I said, I want to be Cindy Crawford. That was my first dream. And then that changed when I realized that the gene pool wasn't really working for me in that favor. And also she existed. And so
she was already alive and real.
It was taken. So it was time to keep dreaming. And I dreamt at one point I wanted to be an archaeologist because I had watched Indiana Jones, and then I wanted to be a dolphin trainer. And oh my gosh, if you ever watch Blackfish, that will ruin your dreams of working at SeaWorld. Yeah. I also hated biology, so also didn't work. But I had all of these dreams that were so random and all over the place. And then exactly to your point, as I got older, people wanted to know, well, what do you want to do? And how's it going to pay the bills? And so then suddenly all the
being practical suddenly becomes the golden standard.
Exactly. And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, I like things like photography and travel and people. And they're like, well, what does that mean? What are you going to do? What's your title going to be? And so I really got swept up into the wave of that fear and that, like you said, practicality and rigidity. Mm-hmm. And that's where dreams go to die.
Yes, 100%. It's getting caught up in what in the narrative, really, and not taking time to press pause and ask yourself what you actually want and believe that what you want could be possible.
Yeah, I think another thing that I've noticed is, and this is cliche, but if you can't see it, you can't be it.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, that's true. It's really hard to dream something you've never seen or heard of before. And for people who are in an environment where there's a lot of restriction and limitation, it's really, really hard to believe that you can do something that isn't modeled for you.
Mm-hmm.
However, I also think it's important to dream of things that you haven't seen. Like you and I have careers that didn't exist when we were children. You know, people were helping people and teaching people, but this whole digital arena didn't exist. And we weren't teaching and educating through digital platforms. We weren't marketing through digital platforms. We weren't able to scale and talk to a global audience with such ease and lack of barrier or restriction. So that all reminds me that, you know, for kids now and young adults or people at any point, what careers are going to look like in 10 years, in 20 years, we probably won't have heard of many of them yet again. And a lot of the things that we're familiar with will go away and become extinct. And so for that reason, I think it makes extra sense to be thinking about what are the real dreams? What are dreams that I haven't seen? How do I amalgamate stuff that does seem weird or far reaching or counterintuitive to put together and build a career on? I mean, the things that I said as a kid that I loved, like photography, like fashion, like people, like travel, like learning, all weirdly fit into my career now, even though they're not my title and they're not super obvious in every element to other people, but they all weirdly made it. And so I think it's great to identify those things for yourself and just think of random ass things of how does it all piece together.
Yeah. And also knowing that like you don't have to know how it's all going to piece together to dream about it, right? Like I think for so many of us, we, in order to take action, we have to have 1 through 10, like all the steps laid out. When in reality, and I've said this a lot before, you know, step number 3 won't be clear until you've taken 1 and 2. So it's this false narrative that like, I have to have all the steps laid out before I can take action, when really it's not until you start taking action that you'll know what you need to do.
It's so true. There is really this false narrative, like you said, that we're supposed to have the whole game plan out, that you should have the business plan and know what A, B, C, D, all the way to Z are. But what happens even when you do that is you end up wasting a lot of time because, like you said, step 1 happens and you realize, well, step 2 is no longer relevant because I learned something in step 1 I didn't predict.
Exactly. So even if you had the whole plan, it would probably go to shit once you started because things change.
Right. And not to say you can't have a vision or have an end goal in mind and move towards it. Like it's great to have a goal. It's great to know a direction to move in, but to hold loosely to it because things aren't always going to go that way. You're going to hit a speed bump. You're going to find a stop sign. You're going to find a roadblock and you're going to need to go in another direction. Mm-hmm. And if you're so beholden to the map that you've already laid out,
right,
it will be problematic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think because, and this is me thinking out loud, this is a half-baked idea, but when we're so afraid of our dreams not coming true, we'll take the first roadblock as evidence that it's not possible and we'll stop.
Yep, totally.
Right? Instead of seeing it as a detour or as, well, here's something I didn't know that I now need to take into what's next for me. We look for reasons to stop because it gets scary or because we're leaving what's comfortable and leaving what's safe. That's what you have to be willing to do in order to achieve your dreams.
Right. So how would you answer then when you know when to quit? Because quitting appropriately is really an important key in this, that sometimes quitting is smart and other times you did it too early.
Yes. Okay. Let's talk more about that.
Yeah. So for you, how have you experienced that?
Oh, good question. I think for me, what comes up for me is intent. What's the why behind the dream? And if that's not clear, yeah, the obstacle is probably going to come and stop me. Like you have to be pulled by something greater than you that's going to get you through the moments where you would otherwise probably throw the towel in. So getting clear on the intent, and again, like letting the grip go, like letting some of that control go over how it's going to happen. Because otherwise, if you come to a point where you're like, no, I'm done throwing the towel and I'm going to quit, that to me is intent either is not clear enough or you're too
you're too attached to how you want the process to look.
Mm-hmm. It almost, in some cases, feels like a self-fulfilling prophecy of
Exactly.
We often have these voices in our head saying, well, who am I to do it? Or I'm not good enough, or whatever the thing is that's critiquing you in your own mind. So that when that hurdle comes upon you, that it's really easy to demonstrate the evidence and say, oh, well, there's the data. I shouldn't be doing this, and give yourself a pass. But I want to share, if I can, a couple stories of different times that the hurdles have come. And I have in some cases persevered, in other cases quit, and in other cases I've let the path unfold differently.
Yeah.
You cool with a few stories?
Yeah, please.
Cool. Feel free to interrupt because I may be long-winded with these few stories. So the first one that I'm thinking about is when I started my first company 10 years ago. So my twin and I decided to go off and start a credit card processing company, not something we ever expected to do, let alone do together. And about 2 years in, we had been completely struggling. We were definitely not revenue positive. Things were, they were just hard. Like everything was a grind. And after 2 years, we finally got this whale of a client who accounted for about 80% of our revenue. And I felt good finally. And to my own dismay, I also had tied my entire identity to the success of this. So I finally felt like, whew, like the business is doing well. I must be doing well. Like it felt really good. Until a couple months later, that customer canceled his contract and bailed, and the business went back down to 20%, and things were really, really bad. And in that moment, I had to make the decision if I was going to keep going. And I knew in my heart of hearts that I had more in me and that I should keep going. So I wanted to, until my mom said to me, I think you should quit, which is like the worst thing you can hear in a moment like that. Like the person who you hope is really standing behind you the most is like, nope, you should quit.
Well, and that's probably your inner voice is saying that too. So to have someone throw that back at you is like, no, I don't want my inner voice to be right now.
Totally. It was terrifying. And so fortunately, I followed the other inner voice that was saying, you have more to give. So I did, and we can fast forward into years 3 and 4, where we had 2 embezzlements and basically went down to scratch again. So at this point, I pretty much had everyone who cared about me in the world being like, okay, Darrah, when are you going to get it through your thick skull that this isn't working? But my brother and I were like, we're not done. Like we just knew that we had figured it out and that we just needed to tweak it a little and we could keep going and be better. And lo and behold, here we are 10 years in. And that was right. We grew into 38 states. And I'm really glad that we didn't listen to everyone around us who really were well-intentioned.
Yeah.
Whereas story 2 was, I wrote a children's book on financial literacy maybe 6 years ago, I believe. And this I had, pie in the sky dreams for. It was during the complete economic downturn, I realized I was taught these lessons, whereas other people apparently were not. And I'm a writer. So here was the melding of 2 things that I could do to help people really positively to get their financial lives in order and teach kids early. And my dream was this is going to be the baby Einstein of financial literacy. And I was bought in. And I spent the first 2 years, after the first 3 years, just getting the book to creation standpoint and published. I spent the next 2 years marketing it and trying every angle from getting to the top of every financial services arena and company and every, wealth management and bank and all their CMOs, and kept getting lip service of this is great, but never getting a yes. And then finally, after 2 years, getting no's across the board, that I felt completely deflated and defeated. And I hit this point where I realized that the current was not moving me in that direction, that I was 100% swimming upstream. Mm-hmm. And that for me, that had to be a put it on the back burner and let it simmer. And so while it wasn't a full quit, it was a quit for now because it felt like the right thing to do, even though I so deeply believed in it. And then, lastly, I'd say in this latest incarnation of my career, as I've gone out into the world to share a lot of what I've learned and help people intentionally design lives and build businesses to fund it and networks to support it, there have been so many moments where I thought something was going to go a certain way. Like the example that's coming to mind is my book. I'm writing a second book, and this time I'm working with an agent, and I had it in my head that in September of last year, I had finished this big virtual summit that you were one of our best speakers on, Tallia. People were obsessed with you. No joke at all. People were like completely obsessed. Oh. And when it was done, I was like, okay, the book proposal's done. I have all the data from the summit. I know the audience. I know what they need. Let me turn this bad boy into my agent. And the agent gets it. She reads it and she's like, yeah, you're not even close to done. And it was one of those moments where I felt so deflated. And now that was what, like 6-ish, 7 months ago. I look back and I am so grateful that that hurdle came, because I've had so many things unfold, like this series with Deepak Chopra and all this other stuff that have happened that have allowed me to go even deeper with my audience, even improve at that much more depth what it is that I'm offering in the book, so that when it goes out to editors, hopefully later this year, that it will be that much stronger and ready to really help people. So 3 different ways that I have hit these hurdles and differently pursued them.
And it sounds like the key the thing you came back to in each moment was trusting to know what to do, trusting yourself in that moment to know, okay, is it worth pursuing? Is it worth going on to the back burner? And really having to rely on yourself to make that decision and trust that it was the right decision for yourself in that moment.
Yep, totally. And at the end of the day, you can take all the feedback and input you want from other people. It's great to have the people in your life who can reflect stuff back on you, who can be a sort of informal board of advisors, but you have to put it through the sieve of your own intuition. End of the day, no matter what, you're the one who's going to bear the consequences, good or bad, of whatever choices you make. And you know your circumstances better than anyone. And there's that intangible intuition piece that no one can see for you. So you have to be able to put it through that sieve.
Yeah. And I mean, that again is what every episode brings us back to, is I don't want to say you can't dream until, but you'll be able to dream the biggest dreams and feel the most pulled by dreams that come after you've taken the time to get to know yourself.
Totally. You know what I was just thinking? That you're a singer, and I'd really love you to sing us a little dream, a little dream.
Not happening.
Maybe at the end? Wait till the end, folks.
This is me turning bright red for all of you. Maybe we'll stay tuned, folks.
Come on, it's my dream.
Stay tuned. Maybe IGTV will grace you with a little jingle at some point. And that reminds me of a quote that you and I shared before we hopped on, in terms of trusting your instincts and really listening to yourself. There's a quote that says, when you have a dream you can't let go of, trust your instincts and pursue it. Right? It's the idea of, like, if something's poking at you or tapping you on the shoulder, if someone's knocking at that door, it's not going to go away. If it doesn't go away, that's when you know, okay, let's listen. Let's open the door and see who's there. No matter how scary it might be, no matter, what obstacles could come up, if it doesn't go away, there's a reason. Listen to it. And the rest of the quote is, remember, however, that real dreams take work, take patience, and require you to dig down very deep. So you have to be willing to go there.
Yeah, I think that we often think that it's this conflated idea of being in flow or in the right place at the right time, where yes, you can have things unfold effortlessly and you have to show up and do the work.
Right. Yeah. And there's a difference too between hard work and work that feels hard. When you're in flow, the idea in flow is like when you're working from a place of strength and really doing what comes naturally to you, it comes with ease, but it's still hard work.
Yes, totally.
So distinction, that's important to make.
Yeah, it's super important. Like when I talked about that virtual summit, it's exactly that I thought it was going to be a 3-month endeavor. It was a 9-month full-time endeavor. And it came together for the most part fairly effortlessly, aside from a legal action that needed to be taken along the way with a contractor. However, it still felt like, putting in the hard work day in and day out was a labor of love.
Yeah.
And that, like your point earlier, it's coming back to the intention and the why.
Exactly.
Which is also why, you're catching me at this time, and we're friends. We would have been doing this, I hope, no matter what, but you're catching me at a time where I put an intention out in the world. And I said, I dream of being on 30 podcasts in the next 30 days, because I felt detached from my why, because I got so in the weeds of the hard work for a while in my business that I said, if I can just get back out to do the stuff that I love and is connected to the why, like sharing and teaching, then I will reconnect to it and the hard work won't feel so hard anymore. It will just feel full. And there's a big difference between pleasantly full and feeling strenuous or strained or busy for the sake of busy.
Okay, so I do want to talk about this 30 podcast and 30-day thing, because I remember reading it and feeling like it was such and now that now again, I'm thinking out loud about this in terms of why it was so powerful to see you put that out into the world. And it comes back down to seeing somebody express a dream and not be afraid to say, here's what I want, help me. So, and I have chills saying it right now, because it's something that most of us don't let ourselves ever do. And to see you do it just showed so many people that it's super possible. And I think what I want to talk about is like, what stops people from doing that? Because if I put myself in your shoes in that moment of like, okay, if I want to be on 30 podcasts in 30 days and I want to put this out into the world, I think what stops people is the fear of it not happening and the assumed embarrassment. Potentially, right? Like, well, what if it doesn't happen? I put it out into the world and people are going to be waiting to hear, or people are going to, I don't know, like judge me or whatever. So there's that bit, is the embarrassment that, well, what if it doesn't happen? What if no one replies or responds? What other things would get in the way of people doing it? And just not believing. And this goes back to the power of belief. Like, if you don't believe that it's going to be possible, you're not going to say anything.
Right.
So the belief is essential and critical to the dream and to expressing the dream, as is letting go of the outcome. Like, whether or not it happens, we'll see, but that's not going to stop me from asking.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff in there. I absolutely feel and empathize with people who are coming to something from the standpoint of the judgment or the embarrassment. I remember when I launched my first company, I was so afraid of that. I thought, I'm going to fall on my face and people are going to laugh at me. But one of the things that has been most freeing for me in my career and my life is recognizing positively that everyone is so engrossed in their own stuff that they're paying way less attention than you think. Yeah. And frankly, as it pertains to this post that I did on Facebook and LinkedIn, I did one post on each platform asking for this. If they didn't see it in the first place, they wouldn't know. And then if they did see it and they were so curious about how it worked, and if it didn't fully get there, then part of that is like a communal onus of, well, did you help me? Did you help me get there?
Yeah.
And the part about asking for help, this one I also deeply feel, because you and I are givers by nature. And when you're a giver, it can feel really hard to ask, because a lot of who we are is built on this foundation of we give to other people. And you never want to feel like you're giving with some expectation of reciprocity. But also, we know, and I have known this through experience and anecdote and through work from people like Adam Grant, that when you create goodness in the world like that and you do for people, they are ready to give back and they want to. And the more specific and actionable you can be with people, the better. And so when I went on, and this is guidance for anyone, because I've had a lot of friends reach out and say, hey, I want to do a post just like you did. And I've given them advice about it, that one is put an image up that actually evokes the thing you want to do. So I put a picture of me in a radio studio on a microphone, so people immediately are connected to it. Two, I was really transparent about why I wanted to do it. And it had nothing to do with self-promotion. I was very clear about what I just shared here in that post. And then I was very tangible, and my ask was clear. There was no questioning. It wasn't going to take a lot of time. I just basically said, if you run a podcast, or you know someone who runs a podcast who would want to talk to me about any of the 3 following topics, tag them below or direct message me. And I think on Facebook, there were over 200 tags and comments, and on LinkedIn, maybe like 40. And which obviously, when you ask something like this, you better be prepared for the aftermath, because I had to spend a ton of time in initial conversations with people and following up and making a first interaction with someone who they tagged, and also being gracious and following up after every single introduction was made and saying, hey, we connected. Hey, I did the podcast. Thank you. Because closing that loop is really critical as well, to keep nurturing your network and thanking them for it. And, I had to be prepared for that. The other thing too, is I had to think forward and think through the steps that might come next. Like, hey, I'm probably going to get invited on a lot of podcasts that are like their first podcast ever. Mm-hmm. And am I okay with that? Because if I'm putting this out there, I can't put restrictions. I can't say, I mean, I could, but I don't think it would have gone as well. But I didn't want to say, except if you're this or this or this or this, then I'm not interested. Instead, I said, you know what? As long as it is a podcast that aligns with what I'm asking for, and I will do it. And it's been a beautiful experience. And I'm so glad that I have. And I've had so many people rally around me and showcase and mirror back to me, hey, you've supported us for all this time. We love seeing you on this mission. And like you said, Tallia, all these people saying, teach me what went behind the scenes for you to do that. Or people reaching out and saying, you must have worked with an agency or something. There's no way that all those podcasts booked you in that amount of time. And I said, no, if you pour into your community, if you, as my friend Jordan Harbinger, who's a very well-known podcaster, says, if you dig the well before you're thirsty, people are ready to pour back into your well when it's time. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what this demonstrates.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. In so many ways. And that another, I'm just going to keep throwing quotes at us because, but another quote we talked about was, a dream that you dream alone is only a dream. A dream that you dream with other people together becomes your reality.
Yeah. I posted about this recently that, life and entrepreneurship aren't a solo sport.
Yes.
And I think people get so much acclaim as an individual. Mm-hmm. You see someone on the cover of something, or you see them as a solo human, but it is always the people behind the scenes that helps them get there. And some of them get credited and many of them do not. And it's just kind of par for the course. But not only are doors opened to the success that you're seeking by the people who know of you and whom you know, but life is a lot more fun and enjoyable when you've got a system of people around you who are there to support you and open those doors.
100%. And for a lot of us, it's not until we put words to it and tell somebody else that we're finally held accountable to doing what we say we want.
True.
And we live so much of our lives. I see this a lot in my coaching clients is they'll finally admit something to me that they've wanted for so long. And my first question is, okay, well, who knows? And not just who knows, but who knows who can actually help?
Yeah.
And for most folks, it's, I've actually never told anyone.
It's true. It makes me laugh because it reminds me of non-disclosure agreements, which is the weirdest segue. When people have an idea and they're like, hey, will you sign this non-disclosure agreement? And unless it's like a patented idea or some trade secret, I'm always like, I'm not interested in stealing your idea. I've got my own stuff going on. And typically it shows me this limiting belief that people have that they're so scared to put their thing out in the world because of the judgment or the theft or the whatever. Mm-hmm. When really at the end of the day, no one's going to build or create your idea or your dream any better than you are because it is yours and has your specific flavor to it. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have competitors or people who are doing the same thing, but none of it will be done identically like it will from you. Yeah. And if you aren't telling people, you're cutting yourself off at your knees because they can't help you and they can't open doors. And it's not that you have to go in asking for that, but people love to give advice. Yeah. And so approaching people, not even from an ask perspective, but from an advice perspective, will often open the door anyway and make them feel less on guard or like they have a wall up. No one wants to be sold something, but everyone wants to buy something and everyone wants to be helpful at the end of the day. Yeah. So if I said to Tallia, hey, Tallia, I want to be on 30 podcasts in 30 days. I'm curious if you think that's a good idea, or as a podcast host, what would you think? Chances are Tallia would be like, yeah, I love that. And also you should be on my podcast. And then it's like, great. She feels great. I feel great. It ends up working out for the same outcome, and you're not doing it as a manipulation, but it's just to help someone really be there for the advice. And if they're able to help, then you've set them up for success to do that rather than putting them on the spot to offer help that maybe they're not interested in giving or cannot.
Yeah. And that's a big piece of it too, as you mentioned earlier, is making it easy for people to help.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. The more tangible, actionable, and so on it is, the easier it is for someone.
Yeah. And I think another element to why it's hard to A, express our dreams, B, ask for help is because of it's attached to guilt. I feel bad asking people for things. People are so busy. Mm-hmm. Everyone has their own stuff going on. And again, to your point, people like to feel helpful. By asking someone to help, you're providing them with the opportunity to feel good.
Yeah, exactly. You have to know that that is a reality. And one of the best ways to know that is to practice it yourself. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you ever did the Give It Forward challenge with me, but I'd be happy to share about it.
Yes, please.
So Give It Forward is this accidental movement that I started when I was in a rut a long time ago, one of many times. And I thought the fastest way to get out of my own bullshit is to focus on helping other people. And what I decided to do was for a 30-day period at a time, instead of passively going into the world as a giver, I was going to proactively enter each day, offering to be a resource to someone with no strings attached. And so that part is really important because it's not about the reciprocity. It's about how do you give and let them choose if they want to give to someone else or not, but not feel like there's an obligation attached to it. Mm-hmm. And the other part of it too is that you don't have to be a magical fairy who pulls from your Santa Claus grab bag and, is able to create whatever wish they have. But you are someone who will say, yeah, I'm happy to try. And so some of the things that have happened from these experiences for me is that you walk away realizing, one, just how easy it is to reconnect with the people in your network this way and deepen relationships very quickly. Two, you realize how much you have to offer that you're probably taking for granted, and that the things that are really simple for you, like making an introduction to someone or listening or offering a resource about, really can solve a massive problem for someone else and can take just a couple minutes. Mm-hmm. And then lastly is this piece of feeling good that I can say wholeheartedly that every time I've taken this challenge, I have felt higher than I ever have consistently for 30 days. And it is exceptional. And when you know that for yourself, then you realize that when you're giving someone an opportunity to help you on their terms, never forcefully, because I've had this thrown back in my face in ways that I think is really counter to the approach, where people will say, hey, I know you're a really giving person, so can you do this thing for me? And I'm like, we've never met. I don't know you. That feels really forceful. It has to be on someone's terms. But knowing that really helps fuel your ability to know that you're not a martyr and you have to ask for things sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Other people clearly play a big part in all this.
100%.
What I also want to talk about is and this is a bit of a generalization, but I feel like it's safe to assume that for most of us, getting caught up in the rat race, autopilot of life, just doing what we feel like we need to do or should do based on whatever expectations we're working off of, is that we kind of trick ourselves into thinking we're pursuing goals or pursuing this dream without questioning whose dream it is.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to also tease out the distinction between living the dream and living your dream, right? There's, I'd like to think this narrative around, the dream is to be, to make this much money and to live in this way and to have this type of business, or to, I don't know, there are things that I think societally we all strive for without really asking ourselves, well, what does that look like for me? Is that what I actually want? What do I feel like that's going to do for me? How is that aligned with who I am and what I value and what I want for myself? So I'd like to almost pose this as a question or a challenge to anyone who's listening, is to take a step back and ask yourself, whose dreams are you living out? Who do they belong to? Maybe they are yours. Maybe they're based off of expectations or dreams that someone else has for you or had for you at some point. Or it's the dream all your friends might be chasing, and you're just by association chasing the same things, right? So I invite you all to challenge, again, whose dreams, where are they coming from? In what ways do they align with your truth? In what ways maybe do they not align? And what, again, back to intent, what's the why behind it all for you?
Yeah, I am nodding my head so much here because it really is about defining success for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that sounds a lot easier than it usually is in practice because, again, the conditioning word, we've been conditioned to believe that there's the American dream, the keeping up with the Joneses / modern day, the Kardashians, and whatever that looks like, find the people in your industry or in your community who are the pillars of that space that often everyone's striving to be just like them and act just like them. And sometimes that is our true dream. Other times it's not, and it has been placed upon us. Mm-hmm. And we're going to circle right back to the premise of everything on this show of, if you aren't quieted enough within yourself and you don't step back frequently enough and for long enough to really assess and access what that is for you, you're going to find yourself on autopilot being the passenger in your own car.
Yep. Amen.
So there's something in here that you said and sometimes, we get these intuitive hits and I feel like someone needs to hear this. So I'm going to take a little swing. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So something that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about dreams is the stuff that holds us back. And I'm certainly guilty of this. My Achilles heel has always been the you're not good enough talk. And the thing that has really helped me to overcome this has been what I call borrowed confidence. It's the thing that I'm able to look at what other people see in me that I don't necessarily believe yet and just wear it and try it on and lean into it until I can believe it enough for myself. And so one of the ways that I do this, actually, this was taught to me by Vika, who you know and might have even been on this show, was to keep a running file of every nice thing someone says to me that, comes in a text or an email or on Instagram, or it's a testimonial for the work that I do. So when there's those moments where I'm feeling really low or like I need some of that confidence, I can go back and use that as a resource. Or when there's opportunities that came across my plate and completely blew my mind, like Deepak Chopra asking me to do a video series with him every week, I had to stop and think, instead of saying, why me? I need to look and say, Deepak sees something in you that you don't even see. So you need to borrow that confidence until you can see it for yourself.
Yes. That's amazing. I love it. Who can you borrow confidence from? Go find it right now.
Yeah, and we all have them.
Yeah.
You have them. You have plenty of people who love you and see so much goodness in you. Let them shower it on you in ways and hold on to it for the moments that you need it.
I'm like, yes. Who am I?
You're savoring it.
I know. I'm like, so I'm sitting in that because I think it's so powerful, and it's so different from fake it till you make it. It's not faking it. It's seeing what someone else sees in you and seeing it for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. We are all mirrors for each other. We know this. It's the things that you see in other people that you admire and often that you don't like. Not always, I don't think, on the don't like, are things that you have within yourself, or at least you have the ability to have within yourself. Yeah. And so when you're surrounding yourself with people who you admire, also stop and realize these are mirrors of me, and they wouldn't be attracted and gravitated towards me if they didn't see something in me either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think in terms of mirroring and reflecting in other people, something that I feel like also comes up for folks is the pushback that they're met with from other people, most likely people who love them, when it comes to pursuing their dreams, expressing their dreams, making their dreams real. So for people who maybe went to their partner or to their closest friend or to their parents or whoever and said, here's what I want to do. Let's talk a little bit about what happens if and when you're met with resistance, or you're met with judgment, or people start questioning and making you doubt the possibility of what it is you want.
Whew, that's a tough one, because I've been there and it's hard. And if you're already in a place where you feel like you are on rocky ground and you don't feel stable in your idea, but it's something you've committed to pursuing, I would be really careful about who and what you're sharing, with whom and about what you're sharing, because that stuff can really derail you. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it takes a lot of strength and gumption to be able to, pick yourself up off the bathroom floor and tell your mom, like in my case, nope, not going to quit, even though you think that I should, when you're already in a really low spot. Yeah. So there's like everything, there's a polarity. On the one hand, it's important to tell people because they're speaking it into existence, because they're going to hold you accountable, because they can open doors for you, because it's going to start to create momentum. And you need to be careful about how much and when and to whom you're sharing. What has been your experience in that regard?
I will say I'm so grateful and fortunate enough to say that most of the people, if not all of the people close to me, have always been nothing but super supportive of my dreams. I would almost like to admit to myself and everyone who's listening right now on the podcast that I don't think I've allowed myself to dream big enough. And I mean, there's a lot that comes up for me just right now saying that. I think a lot of that is fear, not of failure. And you and I have talked about this, Darrah. It's not so much of failure, but it's of all the changes I know that will happen when I go for the big things that I want to go for, and not quite feeling ready for that much change yet. But I do feel incredibly supported by the people around me, and that's such a blessing. I think when I've talked to other friends and clients who, again, might be met with some resistance from folks, it's in more cases than you might think, it's people's judgments are judgments that they have about themselves and their own lives. It's a lot of projection is what ends up happening in those conversations. So if people are telling you not to do it, it's their own fears that are coming up. It has almost nothing to do with you. So to your point, Darrah, it's about having the kind of like mental toughness and the ability to distinguish between, okay, what is actually relevant to me, what belongs to them, what can I take with a grain of salt, and how much of this am I actually going to listen to and internalize. And that it is a slippery slope, because when we are in a place of fear and doubt and, a little bit hesitant, not sure if we want to take action on what we want, we'll look for the first reason to not take action, right? Back to the idea of like, we'll look for evidence that what we want isn't possible, and we'll stop before we start. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Me think of a lot of things. One is that it's great to have supportive people around you, and to make sure you don't just have yes people around. And I'm not accusing you of this. That's not the case for you. However, there's a lot of people, especially the more successful on paper you become, that you're going to get people around who just want to be around and make you feel good about yourself. You don't want to surround yourself with those people. So you've got to, again, follow that inner intuition. And much like Maya Angelou and Oprah have said many times, when people show you who they are, believe them. So you got to pay attention for those signals. And I want to earmark one of the things you said, that it is not the fear of failure. It is the fear of success and all the trappings of it that holds so many of us back. It's very Marianne Williamson of, we're dimming our own light and we're not playing big enough. I am certainly guilty of this as well, because what does that mean for the people in your life? What does that mean for all the doubts you've had? There's a lot of stuff that comes up when you play big. And I don't even know where to go with that. It's a lot. And the other thing you said that I really am curious if you'll allow me to dig into with you is what you so vulnerably, and I'm grateful that you did, shared about not dreaming big enough. And, you shared some of why, but I'm curious, like, what is your dream?
It's funny that you're asking me that, because I literally just wrote that down to ask you. And I don't know if I can answer that fully in the moment. I think I need to take the space, and I need to find the quiet that is necessary to really get in touch with that. I think an element of it is the number of people who I'm working with and like the capacity in which it's happening. So for the longest time, my work has been one-on-one coaching, and it's extremely fulfilling. It feels so good to me. It's where I feel like I'm at my best. There's a part of me that wants to, and it's not necessarily like a literal stage, but to put it out there in a bigger way, to be able to affect more people, to be able to bring people together in community. An element of it is thinking about, women's groups and women's circles and facilitating more conversations on a larger scale. A part of that includes retreats and in-person events, right? So there are a lot of elements to it, but I still need to take the time to really put pen to paper, and also just quiet the doubts and the fears, and know that whatever it is I want, I wouldn't even know to want it unless it were possible, right? Which is what I tell everybody else. But it's like, well, I need to listen to myself.
Well, thank you for modeling for us, like, how that can be hard and how you can have dreams, but still, that there can be bigger ones.
Yeah. And I think a piece of why it's challenging is because there's like an inner knowing that getting to the next level in my business and my life will require kind of a shedding of an old identity, right? And there's a sense of loss that comes with it. And that's scary. But I also think it's important, and again, this is me preaching to the choir. I need to hear this myself. Like, yes, you're shedding and you're letting go, but you're also stepping into the new, and you get to decide what the new looks like. And how freaking exciting is that? That's amazing. But that's where the uncertainty lies, right? Like that's where the work and the quiet and the taking space comes into the picture, because until there's some clarity around it, it's going to be hard to take that first step, I think.
Yes. And you also shared with us that we don't have to fully know.
Yeah. And I mean, here we are with the podcast, right? Like this was my first step in many ways to getting a little bit closer to conversations on a bigger level, to sharing bigger messages outside of one-on-one coaching engagements. And it's trusting that this is going to lead to what's next, and being patient. Patience is such another big topic. We could spend the next 30 minutes talking about just in itself, because it takes time. All these things take time.
The patience piece I really do want to touch on, because there's such a falsification of the narrative in our culture now, where it is always this rags to riches. I started my company, for example, in my garage, and 3 months later it was bought by Facebook for $1 billion. Or, you've never heard of the person and suddenly they're on the cover of every magazine. I call that the American idolization of entrepreneurship effect, where, there's all of these stories that we're being fed. Yet really, if we're going to compare the American Idol thing, that for an entrepreneur, for a person in the world, they were out gigging for years, and they were their own roadie, and they're lugging their own equipment, and they're sleeping in a van. And you just apply that metaphor to your life, and the same thing is happening, that someone is doing the work every single day. And then finally it gets to the point where you become aware of it and you think that it was easy for them. So then you think that for you, it should be the same way, and that your day-to-day efforts feel like you're swimming up the wrong stream. And in fact, that's not the case. There's unicorns for a reason. They're mythical. There's very few people who have those stories that we hold so tightly on as the archetype. So really, it is about savoring those moments in the day-to-day, that if you can't get on board with whatever it takes in the day-to-day functional stuff to make your dreams come true, then you're probably chasing the wrong dreams.
Yeah. Will you say that last bit one more time just so people can soak it in?
Yeah. If you can't really enjoy and savor whatever it takes in the day-to-day to achieve the dream that you're pursuing, then you're probably chasing the wrong dream.
Yep. It's about the process, not the outcome. And we're all chasing the outcome. It's all about the end goal, whether it's happiness or a tangible external thing. If you're not enjoying all the things it takes to get there, then what are you doing?
Right, because there is no there. Right. Once you're quote, there, it doesn't feel any better. We've all experienced this. It's once I get that job, once I get that raise, once I get that house, once I get that spouse, once I get that title, that accolade, that money. And then 2 seconds later, you're like, well, what's next? And suddenly that's no longer the ceiling, that's the floor. And now there's a new ceiling, and then you're striving all over again. And Deepak said to me in our first meeting, Darrah, if you're not happy right now, you'll never be happy. And that has stuck with me so deeply, because it's so true that, yeah, it's important to learn and grow, and through that process work towards things. But that's very different than feeling like happiness is at the when that's never achievable.
Yeah, it's the art of learning how to be mindfully present while still in the pursuit of something greater.
With you on that.
That's the work. And the biggest challenge, at least for me, it's been, how do I get out of living in the future, whether it's what if or what could or what should, and I'm so far from where I want to be, and just staying in the now and focusing on whatever's at hand. And again, trusting in the moment that what I'm doing right now is all that I need to be doing. And it is enough, because it's all that there is. Like literally nothing else exists. And just being content in what is.
Yeah. I mean, yes, co-sign for it.
Co-sign for it. Signing off.
Yeah, it reminds me of a moment 12 years ago when I bought my first home, which I unfortunately did in duress after getting a restraining order against my landlord at the tender age of 23. When I bought the house, I remember explicitly saying to myself, don't want for more. If this is all you ever have, this is enough. And I say the same thing when I get a car. I say this, whenever I do things and, have these moments that you feel like on paper, this is supposed to feel a certain way, but really, it's going to wear off pretty quickly. Remind yourself of that. And it brings you back to that moment and helps you stay grateful.
Yeah. It's learning to not define yourself by temporary circumstance or by anything external.
Or chasing those highs, because that's ridiculous too.
Yeah. I feel like every time we are in conversation with each other, we literally end or try to end by saying we could keep going on for hours because we 100% could.
We could, but we want to be kind to the audience.
We do. We want to respect your time. Hopefully it's still beautifully zen wherever you're listening. Hopefully your candle's still on. Hopefully the rain's still running. Still running? Does rain run? I don't know. The rain's not running anymore here, but hopefully you're still feeling in the zone and in touch with your own dreams. And what I want to end with is how to, maybe an exercise, Darrah, if you have any in mind, or we can maybe co-create one together right now, but how to connect to your dreams. If there were a letter somebody could write to themselves in the spirit of the podcast, if there was an exercise somebody could do to really connect to a dream, any suggestions?
Well, the one that I want to share is the one we did at our workshop together.
Okay, I was hoping you could share that.
But it gives the punchline away. So I'm going to share it and then maybe pause for a second in case you want to stop the recording and do it and then come back.
Actually, I did think about how we would do this. So if you do not have a piece of pen and paper in front of you, pause the podcast now and come back to this because it's only going to work. You can't hear it and then go back and do it. It literally will ruin the whole thing for you. So maybe we'll just say a quick goodbye to those of you. This is like ending number one. We're going to introduce an exercise that you cannot listen to unless you have a piece of pen and paper in front of you. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for those of you who can't write things down right now.
But tune back in once you are prepared with the pen and paper. I will also make sure I talk about that in the intro because this is such a powerful exercise, and let's hear it.
Cool. So take out the pen and paper, have your typing, whatever it takes. I actually really prefer writing. I think that it puts it into your neural pathways in a different way than it does if you're typing. But at the top of a sheet of paper, actually start here. Visualize someone whom you love. And I'm talking to you, Tallia, so I want you to do this exercise. Visualize someone you love. Doesn't have to be like your significant other, just someone whom you deeply care about. Friend, family, love, otherwise. Once you have that person in your mind, at the top of your sheet of paper, write their name. Once you've written their name, I'm going to explain what to do, and then you're probably going to pause because we're not going to sit in silence for several minutes unless Tallia wants to interject some music here. But what you're going to do is write down every single dream you can dream for this person. Like no holds barred. Don't let anything limit you. No, well, they're doing this or they can't do that or money's no, like absolutely nothing holding you back. What do you dream for them in every single arena of their life? Let's think about health. Let's think about spirituality. Let's think about money, career, love, travel, you name it. Put it on there. And then we're going to do the like magical cooking show comes out of the oven formulated. Here we are on the other side. You've done your entire list. Hopefully you actually wrote it at this point because the punchline is coming.
So if you haven't finished the list, pause now and finish the list and press play when you're done writing your list.
So once you've hit back play or your list is done, I want you to scratch the person's name out at the top and I want you to place your own on it. And that might feel kind of insensitive at first, but there's no reason for it to because you can still wish that for that person. But the reason that we do it this way is because, like we talked about earlier, we are mirrors for each other. And it's a lot easier for us to dream and wish things for other people that we are afraid or limited in the way that we can dream for ourselves. So everything you put on there, even if the circumstances are not identical, Like I did this for my friend who is a doctor the first time I did it. And I certainly wasn't like, oh, I want to work in a medical practice or be the top of this hospital system. But there were things that translate. So translate these for yourself and see what that opens up for you so you can continue to dream from there.
I love this so much. Oh my goodness. For those of you, and maybe some of you who are listening, we're actually at this workshop that Darrah and I co-led with Lena Franklin, but the energy in the room, and there, like you knew too, that there was going to be like one or two folks who really needed to do this. And it was just one of the most powerful things I ever witnessed. And
yeah, I just got chills remembering it. It was really cool energy.
It was so beautiful. And I think it hits on how undeserving we feel of things that we would easily and freely tell ourselves everyone else deserved.
Yep.
So hopefully you all took the time to do that and sat with everything that came up, thought long and hard about it. It'll probably be something that you'll marinate on for the next couple of days. But thank you so much for sharing that, Darrah.
Yeah, and thank you for helping preempt the punchline.
And as you know, for all of the lovely guests I bring onto the podcast, there are two questions that I ask in closing. The first is around the idea of living a life of significance, because I think for a lot of us, the problem that we face is insignificance. We don't feel like what we're doing matters enough. We don't feel like the way we're spending our time is important enough. We don't feel like we deserve what we want, right? There's so much attached to that. But in your opinion, what does it mean to live a life of significance?
I believe that a life of significance is based entirely on putting out into the world your own unique gifts, skills, talents, and otherwise, and using them to their fullest. I think where we diminish that is when we belittle them and we don't use them and we hold them back. But that significance really comes in identifying what those are. That being said, it means that you have to break through a lot of this stuff that we've talked about, of the fears and the dreams and the hurdles and whatever other apprehensions come up. But it really is about giving fully of your gifts and talents to the world. And that doesn't have to be to a lot of people. You know, that can be one person.
Mm-hmm. That's important to remember too. It doesn't have to be in this humongous way that affects hundreds of thousands of people. It could be, it's in whatever way you want it to be, right?
Right. Exactly. Like I am clear that my dream is for many, many, many people to be impacted by my work. And I also know plenty of people whom I love and support who their dream is for their work to touch, tens of people. And that's equally important.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. And then my last question to you is, if you were to write a letter to yourself, what point in time would you go to, present, past, future? And what would you say to yourself right now?
Man, I would want to write so many letters. I have written letters to myself in the past, and it's fascinating to read them like time capsules when things come up. And it's an exercise I did. I facilitated a trip in Israel this summer, and I had everyone write a letter to themselves and then sent it to them around New Year's so that they could see where they were at that time. I think that kind of stuff is really important, to see how you've grown or how you've stagnated. But I probably would write a letter to my future self in that way and, post date it and look at it in 10, 20, 30 years, whatever that time frame would be, and just write down what my dreams are and see how they panned out or what changed and what ended up being for me and, what was same, what was different.
Yeah. Writing them down, having something to turn back to.
But if I were to go back, I would say there's a lot that I would have told myself. And, that's with a little asterisk of I had to learn the lessons in my own time. But if there was, 18-year-old Darrah got a letter from today, 35-year-old Darrah, she would have said a lot like, you are good enough. You are your own savior. Don't wait for someone else to make all your dreams come true. She would have said, you're going to be laid off a ton of times. You're going to be really scared for a while. It's all going to work out okay. Stop freaking the fuck out. She probably would have said stuff like, you're going to be in a lot of shitty relationships with men. Value yourself more than that. You're attracting people because that's what you believe you deserve, and you deserve more than that. She would have said a lot of stuff that would have been great to hear, but I had to, in my journey, go through them to learn them.
Yeah. Yeah. In hindsight, it's easy to say, but it's also good to again, take stock of all the lessons you've learned up until now.
Absolutely. It helps you credit where you've been and not take it for granted.
So for all of you who did do the exercise, if you want to use what came up on that sheet of paper as a framework to write a letter to your, I guess it could be present or future self, but a letter to yourself about your dream and what you want for yourself, please do so. And if you want to practice expressing and sharing your dream, I would love to hear about it. So if you want to share your dreams on social media, if you want to email it to me, DM me a little bit about what this episode brought up for you, feel free to do that. And in the spirit of connecting with us in real time, Darrah, I'd love for you to let people know how they can find you and reach out to you and learn more about all the great things you're doing.
Thank you. I mean, the easiest way is twofold. One is my website, Darrah, DARRAH.co. And on there's a lot of freebies. One really stands out that pertains to this conversation, which is a free masterclass and guided meditation with Deepak Chopra and myself on living a more meaningful life. So I'd say grab that freebie, get in there. And then the other is every day I show up on Instagram trying to be of service and using my love of photography all in one. And I am at Darrah B there.
Awesome. Well, we will link all of that in the show notes.
Thanks, girl.
Yes. Thank you so much, Darrah. We just have the most lovely conversations. I love talking with you about these things.
We do. I'm very grateful for our friendship that happened pretty accidentally. So super grateful for that moment.
I'm telling you, the universe brings you things you don't even know you need.
Exactly.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will catch you on next week's episode of the podcast.
Ciao.
Ciao.
I hope you all enjoy that conversation with Darrah. I did want to take a moment to express my deepest thank you and gratitude to Darrah, not just for being on this podcast, but for always lifting me up, for elevating my work, for being such a dear friend and supporter of my work. She recently published an article for Forbes on the top 18 women-led podcasts to download, and she featured Sincerely Me as one of those top 18 podcasts, and my heart is still bursting. It honestly was such a gift, and I am so grateful to you, Darrah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And of course, thank you all for listening and tuning in. That's all we have for you in today's episode. Be sure to check out all of Darrah's goodies and links in the show notes. And as always, you know where to find me on Instagram at Tallia Deljoux and on my website, talliadeljoux.com. Again, /waitlist if you're interested in hearing more about when applications open for the Inner Work Circle starting this August. Have a lovely, dream-filled day. Sincerely, me.